This is the Spiritual Genius Show, the #1 podcast for unlocking more of your spiritual genius so you can really have it all. Get ready to discover timeless strategies and secrets you can use. You'll also hear from world-class entrepreneurs, leaders, athletes, and celebrities sharing how they've tapped into their spiritual genius, along with how you can do the same. Without further ado, here's your host, Yakov Smart.
Welcome to today's episode. Today's guest is Shanuka Jaggi. If you don't know Shanuka, she does a lot of great work. She and I actually met here locally a little while ago, and she does a lot of great work holding space for people in the spiritual space. I know she's built some businesses as well and had a lot of different experiences. So I'm excited to get into today's content. Shanuka, could you take a moment and for people that don't know, tell us a little bit about yourself?
Of course. Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited for how the conversation is going to flow today. But a little bit about me. I'm Shanuka. I am a femininity and life coach. My work is all about guiding women into their softness, heal their relationship with their masculine, and just fully embody their divine feminine energy. So I help women shift out of that overgiving, controlling survival mode and into deep self-trust, magnetism, and just the art of receiving. A lot of women are so blocked from that. They're very in their masculine. So allowing them a space to be guided into healing and ultimately into their softness is my passion. And we do that through my group coaching community where we meet every week to just hold space for the expansion. So, yeah.
Well, that's amazing. So how did you get into doing that as a business?
Femininity coaching in specific. It's so crazy that you asked that because I was just pondering on when my feminine awakening happened literally the other day, because it kind of went from, I used to be very heavily in my masculine. And so I can give you a little backstory. In 2018, I was heavily depressed in a relationship where the guy was really good, but I was so in my masculine that I was very controlling. I was the toxic one. And so I was experiencing just a lot of darkness inside of me and feeling victim to my reality. I didn't really think that there was a way out. I used to really have the narrative of this is just life as an adult. I didn't think that it got better or there was pleasure or anything. So it was a lot of escapism on my end. And then my mom died. So after my mom died, it got worse. It just like plummeted me into darkness, even darker. And 6 months after that, where I was just escaping even more than I already was, I got into a car accident. I'm like, this was my awakening. So it wasn't my feminine awakening, I wouldn't say, but it was kind of like the starting point of that, where I realized that life could end at any moment. Cause like, you know that, but you don't really know that until you're faced with death. I mean, I truly believe like, even if you lose a loved one, it still doesn't hit you the same as if you are faced with it yourself. And I realized that if I had lied there dying, I would have had a lot of regrets. And so my life kind of just took a complete 180 from everything bad is happening to me, this is just how life is, to I just started creating my reality. And it almost felt like some unexplainable phenomena. I even looked it up on Reddit. I was like, why do I feel like I'm in an alternate reality after my car accident? And it's a phenomena. Like it literally, a lot of people experience this. But after that, about like 5 months after I left the 3-year relationship I was in, I graduated college finally, because the last couple of years I was just like really struggling to get by because I just didn't care about anything. And I started my life from nothing. I burnt everything to the ground. I had like -$4 in my bank account. That's where I started. And I realized like me being in victim mentality kept me in a job that I hated, a relationship that I hated, a mentality that I hated. And when I started to create my reality and start showing up with a different energy in my days, I started to receive more opportunity, more experiences, just more pleasure in my day-to-day. And that was really my turning point in 2019 of realizing how powerful we really are. So I like learned about the law of attraction and how it started to instantly start working for me. I actually didn't know what it was until it started happening to me. And I was like, I feel like this is the law of attraction. It like kind of dropped into me. And I was like, I feel like I've heard of that. So I went home. I actually got pulled over one day when things were going really good. And I got pulled over and I was like, I knew it was too good to be true. Like I knew life was like not this great. And I have some speeding tickets under my belt. So I just assumed he was going to give me a ticket, but he smiled and just let me go. He was like, just slow it down next time. That's when I ran home and I was like, what is the law of attraction? Because I feel like I'm just calling in all of these good experiences. And then I realized like the energy that I'm putting out is completely different than what I was putting out before. And so that was my awakening. And then to lead me to where I'm at now, between 2019 and now, there was a lot of, I still was a little bit masculine in my energy. So I attracted in another relationship that was pretty toxic, except he was the more toxic one. And I almost joked to myself of, I feel like this is karma for like, I was the toxic one in my first long term and now he's like, whatever. And so I became the breadwinner. I was very in my masculine energy and I almost loved it because I had this sense of control still. Like I didn't fully surrender to the point that I am now. And it wasn't until I finally was able to get out of that relationship, which it was really bad. Like it ended in a restraining order against him, that I finally felt this like sense of liberation that I had never experienced before. Cause it's almost like you're doing these things to build your life, but there's still something missing inside. And it was reflecting in my relationship and ultimately in my friendships and all of these things that were actually still out of alignment with me. So getting out of that and once again burning everything to the ground is what it felt like. That's when my feminine awakening happened of like, I will no longer place myself in environments that don't serve me. And to do that, it is something that I have to work on internally. I had to take full accountability for that relationship that was super toxic. The last one that ended in a restraining order. That's the time that I was just like, okay, 100% of me needs to be looked at. I can no longer blame external circumstances at all. And that was when truly like my healing process started on a deeper level, when the shadow work started, when the accountability to the next level started. And yeah, after that, I focused fully on my internal. And in the last few years, that relationship ended at the end of 2021. And so the last 3 years have just been a reflection of the inner work that I've done. And it's truly a testament as to how regulated you are is exactly what's reflected in your external.
There's a lot to unpack there. So many rabbit holes.
Yeah.
You know what's interesting is like, it's almost like you had these different stages of spiritual development. You had that first awakening all those years ago after the car accident. And that was like your foot was in the door, right? To this alternate reality. And then through that relationship, it's like you went deeper into your femininity, deeper into more of who you are, right? More of yourself. So the way that I look at it sometimes, I don't know if this resonates, but it's kind of like, you know, if someone has an addiction problem, let's say drugs, alcohol, any type of addiction, right? And there's a rehabilitation that can happen. If they make the choice to change things, there's a little bit of a difficult period, right? Whether they check into a treatment center, whether, you know, they're with friends and family, they're literally becoming a different person. They're releasing something, right? And I think where a lot of people trip up when it comes to certainly feminine, masculine energy, but spirituality as a whole, something happens, we go to an event, we read a book, we have an epiphany, and our consciousness rises, right? Mm-hmm. And then it's almost like a test where something comes up and it's like a stimuli from an old circumstance. Mm-hmm. And at that moment, if we decide to handle it the way that we used to, we attract more of those types of circumstances, or we step into a new reality and everything shifts. So it sounds like that's a lot of what you experience with this feminine awakening, was just being very aware, okay, I'm not going to do things the old way and making different choices, right?
Yeah, like the best way for me to have visualized what it was like, you're right. 2019 was like, after the car accident, was getting one foot in the door, but one foot was still in my old life. Mm-hmm. So there's this line. And so the first part of, I feel like anyone's awakening, maybe you can resonate with this, is like, you're so excited and you want to like, it's very outward. You're like, yo, mm-hmm. we could die tomorrow. Like you can create your reality and blah, 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 blah. And then you like realize that you can't change anyone. This is a personal experience. And I feel like that's almost you trying to convince your old self a little bit to fully get on board. And so, yeah, it truly was me having to visualize and commit to me having that second foot on this other side of the line, which is my current new reality, right? Yeah, that definitely hits, because it's like our minds want to cling to what's familiar. We want to cling to what we know, even if it's a familiar suffering. Like we want to, it's scary to like be in the unknown. But I truly believe too, like the more you get into the unknown and do the scary things, the more fun it becomes, the more exciting it becomes, the less scary it is, you know? And so that old version of me for over 20 years, she was very clinging to the suffering. So I have so much love for her. I've done so much inner child healing for that early 20s version of me specifically, the one that started the spiritual awakening, but like went through the relationship that was toxic and then like was still obsessed with control. I have so much love for her because that's all she needed was love. And now we're here. We like finally stepped over and we did it for her. And like I feel like that's why it's so easy to keep transcending, is because you're working with the past versions of you and fighting with them of who gets power.
Yeah, I call it lower self versus higher self. It's like this battle that's happening, right?
Yeah.
And so the day to day, it's like choosing yourself, choosing future self. I want to talk about this idea of like feminine awakening, because I haven't heard it said like you said it. So I want to unpack this a little bit, right? Most people listening know what a spiritual awakening is. But what does a feminine awakening, when you see a woman who has had her feminine awakening, what's showing up in the 3D for her?
The first thing that I think of is just letting go. So I used to be atheist in my dark, dark days. I didn't believe that there was anything bigger than us. I didn't believe in the universe. I didn't believe in anything. I believed in the Big Bang. That's it. We're here. We died. That's it. Like everything is a game, but it was almost like everything is a game, but now I operate out of love. Whereas before it was operating out of my wounds. So to have your feminine awakening, I truly believe that you have to believe in something bigger than yourself. Because if you don't, you're carrying the weight of everything on your own. And that's how it felt for me. And so what my feminine awakening was truly just surrendering it to God and giving it to that higher power that has taken things away from me when I thought that I owned them. And it's taught, like, God has taught me that I don't own anything. God has taught me that He is the creator, not me. Like we are an image of God. So we do create, as we were put here to create in His image, but we're not God, right? We can't control these external things. And I think surrendering that, which used to be so scary to my old self, who needed to cling to control of everything, even if it was miserable, surrendering control to a higher power and trusting that even when things hurt and you want to control them and you want them to go a certain way, but understanding that the feminine, she doesn't like resistance. She likes to flow. And even if that means having to sit with really painful emotions that are coming up because something's not working out in the way that you want to, but just fully letting go and trusting that there is a bigger plan for you. And that comes with a lot of self-worth. That does. And I see like that's the missing piece. And most of my clients is not believing that they're worthy of more. So they cling to the control of what's not working out in their life. And then more things keep not working out. And so I truly believe a feminine awakening for me was just fully feeling God's presence inside of me for the first time, which happened in 2023 after I was in a situationship in 2023. And like that was the first time that I was broken up with. And that brought up wounds that I have never faced in my life, because it was an actual really good guy and we had a really good vibe, but then he had wounds come up. And so then he left and then I had wounds come up, and it was really, really hard for me to move on from that. But I did let go. Like I did the no contact thing, but it was still every morning I woke up with that aching pain. And it wasn't until like I couldn't bear it anymore. And I was like, I need to give this to God, because this is not what I want to experience anymore. And when I finally was able to realize that it didn't have anything to do with Him, it had everything to do with me looping myself into suffering. And then fully letting go of that and giving it to God, God has now provided me with the life that I currently have. 2024 was the best year of my life. After like, we broke up in like March of 23. So that whole rest of the year of 2023 was painful. It was really painful. It was a lot of me trying to run away. I ran to Tulum, like everybody does when they go through a breakup. And then I realized in Tulum, you can't outrun yourself. And so that's where I sat with a lot of my shit there. And it was very ugly, but like very healing. And then ultimately on New Year's going into 2024 is when I realized 2023 sucked because I allowed it to suck. Like I didn't let go. I didn't trust in my ability to get better, to attract in better. I thought that the best that I had was the best that I'll ever get. And letting go of that has now unlocked another level of that's not true. Because when you get better, you attract in better. And so the more experiences that I have of like loss and grief and going through those heavy emotions and actually sitting with them and holding space for them, the more I know that, first of all, my capacity to love is fucking deep, which is amazing because that's really all grief is. It's like you love so deeply and that's why you're grieving so hard. And also like everything in my life currently is the best that I've ever experienced. And also everything is temporary. And so loving it even harder that I know that, but also surrendering if or when the time comes to have to let whatever I currently have go, to trust that better is always on its way.
Yeah. No, that's awesome. So it sounds like and I can relate to this, like relationships have been such a catalyst for you. It's like anytime I look at big moments of like spiritual ascension for me, it comes on the heels of a breakup or heartbreak. It seems like on the back end of that, there's always something beautiful. So when you work with women, I want to unpack like the divine feminine, like, and get really like, if someone comes to you and there's typically, I'm just going to guess here, and you can add to these, there's certain symptoms of someone who's not in her divine feminine, trying to control in her masculine, maybe a little bit of victim consciousness, someone who's not taking responsibility, someone who's like trying and forcing. That's what comes to my mind, right?
Yeah.
And a woman who's doing this, probably attracting more feminine men, or maybe men who are super masculine to the point where it's just like too much of the extreme, right?
Yeah.
So these are probably some of the symptoms. So I get self-worth and self-love is what it all comes back to, right? But when she comes to you and she wants to work with you, she's like, help me. What's one of the first pieces of advice, like a practical thing that she can do that you would say to most of these clients?
That's such a deep question because it's not that simple. It's not that
not one size fits all.
Yeah, because like they'll come in and a lot of my content is geared towards relationships because, like you said, relationships are the biggest mirrors for us. And so to call women in because my content is geared towards softening in relationships or, you know, kind of the psychology behind men, and then they come to work with me and I'm like, oh, this is not like a seductive, dark feminine like thing like that we're playing games with. This is like, I'm putting the mirror on you. Oh, you want to attract in better men? We're doing inner work. Like they think that they're coming here we're playing games, but we're not. So the first thing that we really do is to go into the shadows. What are your fears? Where do they stem from? Where is your obsession with control coming from? Who led you to believe that your definition of love is the definition that it currently is? And then how can we rewrite that? And how can we somatically start to release that? Because our body is holding on to all of these stories, all emotions. And so we do a lot of the somatic work in the Divine Collaborative as well. So it's really not something that I can like, the only thing that comes to mind is just, well, like, let go. That's the first thing I would say. But it's like, it goes, okay, how do I let go? That's when we go in and we kind of dig deep and yeah.
And I think that's a beautiful answer. Like, let go it's usually the starting point. It's like if you were to simplify this stuff down, there's releasing and there's creating, right? And so anytime we want to create a different reality, we've got to release something, create something new.
Yeah.
So I think probably I would imagine with the work that you do with women, like a big part of their transformation is you just holding space and like seeing them for who they are, because that probably hasn't happened much with them.
Yeah. Well, they're usually always chasing this external source of validation or control or whatever it is. And it's nothing about themselves. And so it's, you know, the divine feminine, she's in flow, she's in alignment because she's connected to self. And so many of us are so distracted and we're escaping. If we have an uncomfortable emotion come up, we're getting on our phones or we're just escaping ourselves constantly. And so a lot of the work that we do is to face these parts of us that are really uncomfortable. There's a lot of tears that are shed on my calls, and we just hold space, and it's so beautiful to witness. And it's also beautiful to be witnessed, because doing this work on your own can sometimes trigger shame because you think you're alone, or you think it's like an isolating experience. And then doing it in the setting of a group is like, oh, you're going through this too? Amazing. Let's work on this together. Let's hold space together. And also like go do things on our own like we need to, but then also come back together.
Yeah. And, I would imagine the transformation, I won't say that it's immediate. Things take time, things compound, but like when someone's lighter, I don't know about you, but I can tell when someone's lighter. Like I can see that if I have a friend, like, oh, you release some stuff. Great. I can tell what state someone's in.
You can tell when someone is operating out of their head and versus operating out of their body. I can't use that. I think people that are operating out of their heads can't tell, but when you're so connected and you're just so deeply present, you can tell. Like I instantly gravitate. It's probably why I gravitated towards you, or when we met at the networking event. But you can tell when someone's just like fully present and not overthinking. What is this person thinking about me? What is my image? Like, what am I worthy of being here? All these stories where it's like just dropping all of those thoughts into the body and just operating from the space of like, well, if I'm in a room, I'm worthy of being here.
Yeah, it's a practice. I think it's something that you've got to reinforce and develop, and it just happens. So I'm curious, like a lot of these women that come to you, are they in relationships? Are they single? Is there like dream to be in a certain type of relationship? Because I'm curious about that.
It's a whole different vast of. There's women that are in relationships that want to get out of their relationships. I see that's the common theme of like women, they join and then within the next couple of months they're breaking up with their man. There's women that are in happy relationships, or not happy relationships, because they obviously like want to do the inner work. They're in a relationship with good men, but they're struggling to let go. They're struggling to trust. So they want to soften for them to not mess up this relationship. There's women that are single that are like, I keep attracting in the same type of men, and I'm ready to look within and break the cycle. And yeah, there's women that are in happy relationships that just show up because, like I said, they come into the Divine Collaborative and it's like not fully about relationships. It's about your relationship to yourself. And so what we learn in here can be a benefit to anybody.
I see that. It's like 3 different parts of the journey, but it's all the same journey. It's the journey of them stepping into femininity and self-love and elevating in consciousness. So I'm curious, in your perspective, because relationships are so fascinating and so spiritual too, what do you define as an ideal relationship?
I feel like my relationship is ideal. I love it. I'm so grateful because I started the Divine Feminine coaching before I was even in a relationship. We're coming up on a year next month. But he is when you do the inner work. So I was doing the inner work before I met him, and coming back to my worth, I wasn't looking for a man when I met him. I was fully in my energy. I met him about a week or 2 after you and I met. So February 22nd is when we met. And I was fully in my energy, fully whole and complete, not looking, like I said. So showing up for myself, and I was dating myself. Like I was going to sleep with like cute little pajamas. I was taking myself out to nice dinners, like doing the things that most women are like, I'm going to wait till I get in a relationship to take care of myself in these ways. And I was like doing that already. And this is a practice that I have my clients do. And they're like, oh, I don't even feel lonely anymore. I feel like I'm doing the things that I would do if I was in a relationship anyways. And so what I feel like is an ideal relationship is a woman that is fueling her passions. She's being her creative self. Like she's got her creative outlets. She's got her sisterhood. I think sisterhood is so, so important, especially when you're in a relationship, to not depend only on your person, but to have your women or your friendships that are outside of the relationship keeps it healthy, right? And so to have my passions, to have my career that lights me up, and then also to have a man that is very in his masculine energy, but he's built himself up and done the inner work as well, to not be threatened by the success of his woman, but be supportive of it. And so it's kind of like this beautiful dynamic of like, okay, I know he's more successful than I ever want to be. And so like seeing how hard he works and also how much time he allocates to me, I want to be soft for him. I want him to be able to turn his brain off when he comes home from a long day. You know what I mean? And for him, he's my like, he's like this grounding, stable force in my life. Cause sometimes I get so in my feminine, I'm just floating away. And so to have that stability, and then like when we are out and about, like I get to just turn my brain off. And I'm just like, I don't know where we are. I don't know where we're going. And he's just like got everything taken care of. I never have to worry about where we're going to eat. I never have to work. I don't even know. We just show up. Like that's the thing. And so I think the beautiful like energy between the masculine and the feminine is a man that allows a feminine woman to be more in flow. So I was already in my soft girl era before I met him. Yes, I'm running a business and I was building my business, and 2024 was the best year for my business and it's still expanding. But I was still in my soft girl era. I was dressing up every day, going to coffee shops to work and also be social and like be in these environments to meet people and very open energy. And then I meet this man that is like, I love all of these parts about you. How can I allow you to be even softer? How can I take burdens off? Let me pay your rent. Let me do this stuff so that you're like even more in your feminine. And because he's taken these burdens off, it's allowed me to pour more into my business, pour more into my people, pour more into my passions. And it's like taking away stress that I would maybe need to be more in my masculine for if I didn't have him. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. So, question about that. I'm curious, what are 3 ways you guys are similar and 3 ways you guys are different?
3 ways that we're similar. It's an interesting question. So we both are so he owns addiction treatment centers, so like rehabs.
Mm-hmm.
So we both are really big into the inner work, right? He's 21 years sober. So like he has done the inner work to get to where he's today. And so I think being able to talk to him about things like breath work or like just when conflict arises in our relationship, it's never like you did this or I did this. It's like you and me versus the thing. Like let's unpack this. We've never like really raised our voices at each other. It's always just let's talk about this as like it's something outside of us so that we can get to the solution. So I think that's one thing that is really that we value that is similar in us. I think health is one of the best. We met at the gym. So like we really value our health. And like I love going to the gym. So talking to him about things like that. And then I think, let's see, how else are we similar? I feel like what's coming up for me is the fact that like we just love the masculine and feminine dynamics. It's so crazy because it's like he was able to see the value of my feminine energy before he even knew how passionate I was about it. And I was able to feel his masculine energy the first time we met. And so I feel like that, yeah.
Okay.
And we're different in a lot of ways. I am a very social person. He is not. He's very like, he's got his close friends.
Mm-hmm.
And I like, we'll go out to dinner. I'm talking to the server. I'm just talking to everyone around us. He loves that about me. So he's never like, don't do that, which it's just like a healthy dynamic, but we're just different in that aspect. Let's see, what else? How else are we different? I don't know. That's a lot. 3 ways that we're different. Because I'm like more social, I like to go out more. Like I love going to EDM shows and festivals. I love house music. That's not his thing. I'm hoping to start making it his thing, but that's something that like, yeah, we don't have that in common. Also, another thing too is like, so he likes to do things alone. Before we met, I don't mind doing things alone. So like, it really works out for us because when he's busy or when there's like an EDM show and I want him to come, but he can't, I can just go by myself. And so we both value that in each other too. It's like, we don't need each other to do these things that bring us joy, but we honor each other's interests. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay. So you got the two ways. You got like one person's more extroverted, one person's more introverted or less like socially outward, and then the different interests. And
Mm-hmm.
and then obviously the masculine feminine is a big difference. But would you say there's any other like big differences? Because I'll give you context too, which is why this is so interesting. Because like some of us, I've had relationships before where I was like, I look back on, I was like, shoot, I was trying to just date myself. I was like, we were too similar. It was a problem. That was like a core issue. And I've had other relationships where it was like, oh, complete opposites. And there was a lot of attraction at first. And then it fizzled pretty quickly because there wasn't like that foundation. So to me, it's really interesting. I think there's a sweet spot. Just like listening to what you're saying is like there's a happy medium, and that's where the magic happens.
Yeah. Well, I think we are very different in a lot more ways than I feel like I can think of right now. I guarantee once we get off this, I'm like, oh. But like I said, it is truly like coming home to each other in that masculine and feminine way. I've seen it where I just moved into this apartment and I felt really uprooted for a couple of months because moving just uproots you. And so I was out of my body completely and I was very in my head. I was creating stories and I did feel our dynamic I did ask him like for a lot more reassurance during that time just because I was like working on like being in my own energy again after being in this new space. But it did kind of cause a little bit of separation and I felt it with myself. I was separated from myself. And so it was causing that distance because I felt distanced from myself. And so I think like we can have these differences. I don't think we're meant to be the exact same. But it is just the energy that we come to when we're together and the life that we want to build for ourselves and just how we show up for each other too is like how we protect and just are so good to each other, I think, and so supportive of each other. I think that's the foundation, right? Like we don't need to be the exact same. You don't need to think like me. That's another thing too, because I feel like in my past relationships where I was trying to be in control, it was like, you don't know this, or you need to like know everything that I know. You need to think the way that I think because it's the only way that's right. And so he inspires me in a lot of ways where like, I have like these big eyes and there's so much to learn from him. He's a little bit older too. So it's like, and he's been in the business for longer than me. So learning from him is just, yeah. I feel like it's a beautiful dynamic because there's a mutual respect.
Well, that's key, right? Having that mutual, that trust, that respect. And I want to shift gears and we start to wrap up too and talk about like the future, both in terms of business for you, right? And where you see your spiritual practice going in the next months and years to come.
If you're looking for more clarity right now, whether that's in your business, career, relationships, or any other area of your life, I've recorded a short training you can use to find more clarity, Spiritual Genius style. This training is my gift to you for being a listener of the show. To access it, all you have to do is go to spiritualgenius.org/gift. Once again, that's spiritualgenius.org/gift. Now back to the show.
I love that question because it's so interesting. So I went to life coaching school before I launched my coaching business, which honestly was a waste of money. I like learned the basics of what coaching is. Basically, here's thousands of dollars worth of what I learned. Ask good questions. That's it. And so like I'm currently in a love, sex, and relationship coaching certification. It's a 12-month program. And so I'm very into the somatics of, getting into the root, feeling it, holding space for it, and literally energetically like releasing it like through breath work or through these powerful modalities. And so as I'm in this training, I'm also started to like implement some things into my coaching. And I've seen just such a big transformation in my clients on just one call. And so I think a lot of what my coaching is going to transform into right now, it is a very liberated feminine energy, but I think I'm leaning more towards the sexual energy piece of it just because so many women are disconnected from their sexuality and our sexual energy is for men and women is our creative energy. It's like when you're turned on, that's when you create the best shit that you can create. And so I do see my coaching transforming from there, but I don't see it fizzling out from what it currently is. I just see that evolving. So the Divine Collaborative, what it is, it's kind of a beautiful thing. It's like a mastermind, right? But it's beautiful because it's evolving as I'm evolving. I launched that in October of 23, not knowing what I was doing, but I love that version of me because she just did it. I still don't have the best systems in place. And starting in February, I hired someone to come in and do systems for my client's journey a little bit better, which I'm really excited about. But it was just getting started for me. And my clients that have been in there since the beginning, there's clients that literally will never leave. And they're like in it for the journey. They're like, we love to see the expansion of this. So it's a beautiful thing to have clients that have been there since day one to see my expansion as well. But that's where I see it going. I just see it continuing to call in women. I've noticed that just with the messaging in my content recently, it's calling in women. Like I'm having sales calls after sales calls, like it's nothing, just adding women after women, because so many women are so sick of their own shit, specifically in relationships, and ready to look inward. And so when we can go a little bit deeper and into that sexuality, you can be more liberated. And so that's where I see my coaching going, my business.
Yeah. That's amazing. One thing about you that you really are good at owning is like you just started, right? You started things. You didn't have a perfect plan. I think a lot of people in the spiritual space, in any business space, by the way, overthink, create a business plan, go get 20 certifications. And then they're like, maybe one day when I'm ready. And that day ain't coming. That day is already here. You just gotta own it.
It's so funny. I was just thinking about this. I swear it was like 20 minutes before our call. I think people will invest into more mentors and more coaches and more this and more that as a crutch to not.
100%.
They're like, it's like buying them time in their mind. Like, oh, well, once I finish it, I'll get to it. But it's actually just not believing in your ability to go all in and start. And so my big thing is like, do a terrible job, because doing a terrible job is better than not doing the job at all.
Yeah, and it's a step in the direction, right? It's a step towards where you want.
1% better. Yeah.
Exactly. So that's awesome that you did that. You were like, yeah, I was single and I started this thing and I felt passionate about it. And then here you are today. That's amazing. And I feel like everything just kind of connects because you took that leap of faith, and more people need to do that. Like the time is now. Like, the time is now, and you can always course correct. You can always adjust, but to be in motion is the biggest thing.
Yeah, that's how you learn. That's how, if you don't have anything to build on, how are you going to get better? People, and that's another thing too, perfectionism. It's just a form of laziness. It really is. Yeah.
It's a good way to say it. It's like get data, right? Same thing with dating. I've met people who are like, I'm taking a break from dating, and like, or people who are just like, complaining about it. That's why I don't like the word single. I think there's a whole attractor field with that word. And I realized this last year. I was like, anytime I go to a singles event, it's some low energy stuff. I meet desperate people. And even if there's attractive people there, they're not behaving attractively. And there's like this identity. And I've been places where I've just like overheard conversations, and you hear like women talking, men talking, doesn't matter. They're complaining about being single or talking about how so-and-so sucks. And it's like, dude, you're so in this identity. That's why I think I think the very first thing is deciding to step out of an identity. And I think that's what especially with like building this business, like you stepped out of the identity of, oh, I'm getting certified, I'm just learning. You're like, no, here's the community, here's what I offer. Let's figure it out. Let's go.
Do you have a term that you use instead of single?
I do.
What is it?
Free agent.
Free agent.
Agency. Yeah. It's a term from professional sports.
That's so good though. I love that perspective, because like, it's like how I was saying before I met my partner, how I was just full. I wasn't looking, and that's the time that I was attracting. Yeah. I was attracting in very high value men, I would say at that time, but I was like so whole in who I am that it wasn't like, oh my gosh, I'm getting attention. It was like, oh my God, thank you so much, but I'm just not interested. I like truly was like, I am on 100 alone, that if no one can meet me there, that like until someone can meet me there, I'm going to be a free agent.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. There wasn't any of that like trying or forcing.
Yeah.
It can be fun because you get to explore parts of yourself, explore other people. So I think for anyone listening who's in that space right now, maybe they just got out of a relationship, and maybe that's what brought people into spirituality. A lot of people get into this stuff because of dating, and like there's different situations. The biggest thing is like you want to switch the paradigm of where you're coming from. Not only even what you're doing now initially, but where you're coming from, and you chose to come from that place just makes it so much easier.
There's so many people that are lonely and in relationship, and there's so many people that are single and thriving and full and whole as they are. So it's like the grass is truly only greener where you water it. So
that's a great way to say it. Yeah. And as we wrap up, this has been amazing. Thank you for sharing. And I was telling you before we started recording, we never know where these conversations are going to go, but they end up in perfect places. Exactly. So thank you for sharing the stories. We covered a lot of ground here. Where can people go to connect with you online?
Yes, you can find me on Instagram. That's mainly where I'm at. And it's at Shanuka _. So SHANUKA _. And thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely. We'll have that in the show notes. And thank you for listening to another episode of the Spiritual Genius Show.
Thank you for listening to another episode of the Spiritual Genius Show. Remember to subscribe and leave a 5-star review. When you email a screenshot of your review to info@spiritualgenius.org, we'll send you access to a special training on unlocking more of your spiritual genius in your business or career. Once again, the email address to send that screenshot of your review to is info@spiritualgenius.org. And remember, as always, the content of this episode and every other episode of this show are for entertainment purposes only. No solicitations are being made of the audience, and this show is not in any way intended to provide or be a substitute for any medical, legal, or financial advice. It is strongly recommended that you consult with a licensed professional before making any and all decisions around these matters. Till next time, stay well and remember that your spiritual genius awaits.